Morning everyone and welcome to the 5 Property Show this Saturday. Today's topic, we are talking about letting agents' diaries and behind the scenes of a typical working week. And I thought the best person to talk about that with this morning is our letting agent Karen Marshall. Morning Karen.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good, thank you. There's a lot to cover in this topic.
There is a lot to cover in this topic, and I think obviously to describe our job in a single phrase, it would probably have to be never a dull moment.
Yeah, certainly.
Is that safe to say? But aside from obviously opening the office, making coffee and chatting new messages, no 2 days are ever the same in lettings. I'm sure you'll agree with that, Karen.
No, you never know what one day is going to differ from the next.
Yeah, but a great part of the job is obviously meeting new people, and being in the neighbourhood are two of the most favourite things for me, and I'm sure you're the same, obviously being quite a people person yourself. But the icing on the cake is handing over the keys on a move-in day. It's such a moment of joy for everyone, and I think obviously the landlord, the tenant, and us, and it's the start of a whole new chapter. And it is quite rewarding when you get to that stage and do that whole process. And you're obviously at the front line of move-ins and lettings at the moment, Karen, and you'll know that feeling obviously when you go through that whole process with a landlord, then find the right tenant, and then move them in, and it is very rewarding.
It is one of my favourite parts of the job is being able to give them that call and see the landlord's happy to go ahead with yourself for the property, and just the joy that you get from some people. It makes you feel so good. And then obviously they're looking forward to going into their new home. So making that call is definitely one of my favourite parts of the job.
Yeah, definitely, and it gives you great job satisfaction, I think, as well. But the lettings world does move very fast and a lot faster than sales. But us as letting agents have far more paperwork and responsibility. With no solicitors checking contracts, it's down to us to get everything right, and all the while keeping the pace. And I can't emphasise how much to everyone how fast-paced lettings is. And we do have quite a lot of responsibility. There's so much legislation and the legal side of things for compliance with lettings, and we have to be the ones that are in the know and advise obviously landlords and make sure that properties we're managing are kept compliant and obviously up to the current legislation. So yes, it's not always easy. Sometimes for us, obviously, we take some things for granted because it's second nature and that's part of our job. But you can find landlords who are new to property letting and investment are very kind of out their depth and feel very overwhelmed when they think about the legislation and things. So, but that's what we're here for. So anyway, I was talking to a landlord the other day about, obviously, we were one of the first group in Scotland to do the Let Well qualification, Karen, which we found amazing because obviously, as knowledgeable as we were, after doing that qualification, there was so much more that we even picked up. I mean, so obviously it's a good thing to have. I'm going to do a couple of good mornings. Good morning, James. How are you? So yeah, there's a lot more happening than people obviously just showing people around houses. So let's have a look at all the different aspects of letting this morning. And I think we'll kick off by looking at valuations and new listings. And a big part of our week is meeting new landlords, seeing new properties as one of the job's best qualities, and getting them ready for the market is even more exciting. There isn't anything more exciting within the job than putting a listing together and having it all looking nice, getting it out there, and getting that feedback. And I'm sure you'll agree, Karen. Lettings used to be a complete free-for-all, I would have to say, before obviously legislation and things come in, although it may be tricky to follow, it is there for a reason. And with multiple agencies instructed on nearly every home, but I think more and more landlords want to work with a single agent they could trust, and we need to fill them confidence, with confidence that we to win the business. And I think that is something we spoke about through the weekend when we do our weekly training sessions and things, is that we need to continually adapt our knowledge so that we could then demonstrate that we are the right people to be looking after the property and build that rapport and trust with landlords and investors that they've got the right person and that they could come to us and feel confident in the fact that we're going to have the right answers for them. And that's something we spoke about through the week there, Karen, yeah?
Yeah, obviously every day is a learning day. So It's making sure that we know what's going on, what legislation's been updated, so we can then feed back to our landlords and they're getting the right information and making sure their properties are kept compliant.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the whole valuation process is all about using examples of other homes that we've let and managed nearby, and that shows the landlord that we get the results and that our advice makes sense. You need to demonstrate the valuation part of a lettings appraisal to people, that how you've come to that valuation for the property. I mean, we don't just pluck rental prices out of the air. It has to be based on, obviously, the current market trends, and obviously we've got quite a lot throughout Fife that we could use as examples. So so a lot of time goes into preparing for an appointment when you go out to speak to landlords and investors. You don't just obviously walk in and wing it. It needs to be obviously a structured kind of methodical process where we need to demonstrate that we have done the due diligence and looked at the property valuations of other properties that are similar in the area. Morning, Jim.
Morning.
And James has got a comment here. Need to speak to you about getting project Barney. That's James's new buy-to-let project. So yes, we will help you with that, James, of course. Yeah, but while we are on a valuation, we always look for ways to improve a property and achieve the highest rent possible and get the best tenants. We've built up a fantastic list of local contractors over the years, and it's really rewarding to see our recommendations come to life while managing projects. And more we do that quite a lot, is obviously project management. Obviously, I project manage quite a lot of gyms, well, most of Jim's properties now. And obviously, we have got such a big contractors list that's taken us a lot of years to build. And we do have quite a lot of trusted tradespeople, which is a key element, obviously, when you are renovating and doing new buy-to-let investments. Karen, you work quite a lot with contractors, and I mean, tell us how important it is to have reliable contractors.
It is when you've got either a tenant in the property, or even if your property is vacant, you're working to a time scale regardless. So having a reliable contractor that can come in and do the job and do it properly as well is such an important factor when you're in property.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even I think even more so in these times recently, where we have had such a big backlog of contractors availability, and also the availability of materials and things as well for doing the necessary repairs or works to properties to get them ready for the market, is a challenge. So having these good, reliable contractors is a key point. But once we've got landlords go ahead and we've got the keys to the property, speed is of the essence, and we don't wait around for the photos and descriptions to be uploaded to the portals. We go straight to our list of potential tenants, which we have quite a lot of at the moment because of the demand for property in the current market. And also we use our social media platforms as well now, and that is another key element of the whole lettings process. I think it's a key part for us to get properties out there and ahead of the game, especially with the amount of demand we get for property. And Karen, I'm sure you will experience a really high demand from tenants inquiring lately.
There's so much demand for people that are looking for properties versus not enough on the market for it. So it's great when we've had a property potentially. So I've had one recently that I had 2 really suitable applicants for it. I would have been happy going ahead with either of them. Obviously, unfortunately, only one of them could get it. So now it's on the hunt for another property in Glenrothes, anybody with a 2-bed. But trying to find her another property, because ideally I would love to have her as a tenant. So it's keeping these people in mind. So when you do get new listings coming up, you can go straight to them and say, look, I've got this property. You're already been through the credit checks and everything is in place for you. Do you want to come and see it so we can try and find you a new home?
Yeah, definitely. And it's all about minimising void periods and keeping our clients' income flowing. So on the back of what you were talking about there, let's look at inquiries and viewings and offers on rental properties. And there are numerous new inquiries every day, either by phone, by email, but not every viewing request is a good fit. Before we take anyone to see any property, we have to do some basic checks with every potential tenant and avoid booking wasted appointments. And Karen, that is a big part of what you do on a daily basis. So I'll let you kind of do a rundown of what we do now in terms of pre-qualifying potential tenants for properties.
Yeah, so obviously before we take anyone out to our property, there's some basic checks that we have to ensure to make sure that it's going to be the right fit for the property. Obviously, we can get some general inquiries that come through that just say, I'm looking for a property in Fife. So it's trying to make sure that you're finding a property that's going to be the right fit for the person, and then obviously making sure that they are going to be the right fit for the property. So carrying out pre-qualifying checks with them before they're even getting in to view the property is a key point that we've found now, especially with the high demand that we've got in the market, making sure that we're finding the right fit for the property before taking people out. So pre-qualifying checks for them. Obviously making sure that their timescale is going to match the property's availability as well. Obviously we have a varied range of properties that are on the market, some of which are ready to go, some of which are still getting the final checks carried out at them. So making sure that you've got ones that are going to be a suitable timescale for people as well. Obviously making sure budget is in check. You do not want to be going out with somebody that at the end of the day is not going to be able to afford it, and they're going to end up in financial difficulty effectively. So it's trying to eliminate that in the first point, which also can be done by checking their employment status. So obviously while we're doing the credit checks and referencing point, we make sure that their income matches what they say it is, by obviously getting some proof of their employment for it. And obviously looking at their time scale as well. So this can be how long they're looking to stay in the property for. We have some landlords that are looking for short-term tenants, but majority are looking for somebody that's going to be there long-term, settle in, look after it like it's their own home, and obviously then you're reducing the property's void periods as well. So there's loads of different factors that are coming into this to making sure that you're fitting the right tenant for the right property.
Yeah, I think like that you hit a point there about obviously the length of how long a tenant looks to live in a property, and I think that's very important for investors who are building a portfolio. Ultimately, want the longevity of a tenancy, and they're in it for the long term. So for us to be able to establish the term that the tenant's going to stay there is a big part of obviously minimising void periods and having a tenant in there for a considerable amount of time. You don't want a lot of turnaround and things, obviously, on a property, which could cause it could be costly, and it's an inconvenience to everybody, really. But we see more and more that tenants want to stay longer in property, and I think you'll agree there, Karen, that it's becoming more of a trend that people look to let for longer periods, and it's not just a short-term thing. Like you say, we do have shorter-term tenancies for whatever reason, but on the whole, it's long-term tenancies, and that's what we aim to do. Ensuring that a property matches what they are looking for is a key one. You touched on that there, and I think that's something that we filter out at the beginning. You say obviously sometimes you get a generic, I'm looking for a property in Fife. Well, what is it you're actually looking for? I mean, do you have a family? Are you looking for a family property, or are you single? Are you coming here to work? So there's a lot involved in that as well, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
But there can be a lot of coordination in getting everyone who intends to live in the property to come on the viewing. The lettings business is very fast paced, and if someone is missing from the first appointment, their housemates may want to get the chance to have a second look. Now, obviously, we always insist that people or somebody on behalf of the person, depending on the circumstances, looks at the property. And then I've got a few comments here. James says, have you ever experienced bidding wars? Very much so, James, especially in the current market. So yeah, that's definitely something that we've experienced a lot more lately. And I think it's a way for us to then maybe renegotiate slightly more on the rent off market rather than setting the benchmark too high with the rental valuation in the beginning. And that's all part and parcel of what we do in terms of the referencing and the pre-qualifying checks and things leading up to that. But offers are always good news, but before recommending them to the landlord, it's a good practice to double check the facts to ensure the tenants are suitable. This means getting all the details confirmed in writing by email, so no one gets forgotten or nothing gets forgotten or assumed. So yeah, Karen, like I say, obviously the importance of getting all the information from the tenant. We done a show midweek the other week there just about preparation is key, really, and having a tenant that is prepared with all the correct documentation and what they're actually looking for and budget and things is so important. Do you want to recap on a wee bit about that we spoke about the other week, Karen, because that's really relevant to the whole process?
Yeah, so obviously when you're starting out your journey and looking for a property, you have to have your ducks in a row effectively. You have to know what it is that you're looking for. Key point is setting up notifications with portals such as Zoopla and Rightmove, or following pages such as ourselves that do pre-launches on social media for properties, so you're in there in the first instance and you're not missing out on properties. As soon as a property goes online, we have inquiries coming through, so you don't want to be a couple of days down the line and seeing a property coming on for it to already have a list of people and you're at the bottom of that list. So being prepared and knowing what you're looking for so you can be in there in the first instance. And your paperwork as well is such an important part, which I think we'll touch on shortly.
Yeah, and I think from our point of view, let's have a little chat about teamwork and how we work as letting agents and as a company to obviously help achieve the goals that we set out to on behalf of the landlord. And although we have our individual roles, everything anyone does affects the whole team. So constant communication between us is crucial. Obviously, yourself, Karen, does lettings. We have the property management side, which is split up into obviously maintenance and credit control and accounts. And so we all need to keep in contact with each other and have clear communication. Otherwise, the whole obviously rhythm of how we do that process can be upset, and it could cause a lot of issues if it's not done properly. And as well as updating each other immediately of all the new listings and offers, we get together once a week and we discuss everything that's going on. And I think, well, to be fair, we have morning meetings every morning just to touch base on what is on the agenda for the day and what we plan to do and who's going to do what. And that is an important factor within our team to be able to run things smoothly on a day-to-day basis. And our morning meetings are very important, as well as our bigger team meetings throughout the week. And things that we do discuss in morning meetings are things like feedback from viewings and has the landlord been updated on the feedback. Any upcoming move-ins each day, we cover that every morning. Who we have moving in for the week on a Monday is quite important, and then throughout the week we touch on that. If there's notices being given to tenants served by the landlords, or if the tenant's given notice, making sure that everybody's in the loop and the correct procedures being followed to lead up to the date that they are due to vacate. Potential and actual disputes, if there's anything that's a dispute or an issue between the tenant and something with the property, or so things that we need to look through and resolve is something else that we speak about on a daily basis, and that will involve maintenance issues and any works or improvements that need done to a property to then get it across the line and on the market as soon as we can. That's been a big issue for us lately with, obviously, like I say, contractor setbacks and the demand for material or the shortage of material and things as well. So that's very important, and that's something that we group every day and discuss about how to get properties across the line. And changes in legislation are such a big thing, and we, like I said at the start there, we need to always keep up to date with the legislation and compliance and make sure that we are the ones in the know to be able to then advise landlords or tenants or whoever it may be of the correct, obviously, information at the time. And together with everyone working, our landlords are also part of the team. And I think that's an important thing. And we work so closely with all the landlords and investors. I'm sure a lot of who are watching will agree with that. And it is about a big team effort to make things work smoothly for the whole investment journey. And we're all working towards the same goal, and keeping in touch with everyone each week ensures that everybody feels connected and valued. And I think that's very important, to have that clear lines of communication and keep everybody in the loop. And we always aim to get in a drink at the end of the week. I think that's an important part as well. But yeah, like you say, Karen, when you get to the end of the week and you've had successful move-ins and happy tenants, and it's job satisfaction, and it's quite rewarding as well. And I'm sure you'll get to the end of the week and feel that quite a lot.
It is, yeah. It's great getting everybody moved into their new properties, but at the end of the day, it wouldn't happen without us all working together. As you say, it's teamwork that gets these properties over the line, whether it's arranging move-ins. Obviously, I have a lot of involvement with arranging the move-ins, but there's a lot involved in even just getting the property ready. So obviously speaking with property management to make sure we're all on the same page, we know what's happening, and it's progressing as well. So we're getting this property ready for the move-in date. So at the end of the day, we all have to be working together to get these properties over the line. So it is such an important factor.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when there's so much involved on certain properties, whatever the situation may be, and everyone's obviously got their role to play, and sometimes it could be challenging. I think that's probably the best word. So when you get to that point and it's all been successful, it is very rewarding. But let's have a chat about paperwork. And paperwork is a big part of what you do, Karen, obviously with lettings and referencing and things. And there's a lot of paperwork involved in lettings, and there's no room for error. I mean, tenancy agreements as a legal document, and obviously referencing checks, and making sure you have done your due diligence on the potential tenants, and obviously advising the landlords that they've got all their correct paperwork and insurances and registrations and things in place. It's absolutely vital to make time out of our week to keep up with the latest news and changes in law to ensure that we're giving the right advice. And most tenancies end amicably, but plenty of landlords come unstuck through an understandable lack of knowledge around the ever-changing legislation. And each tenancy needs to start on a solid footing. And I think that's so important, to start a tenancy correctly with the right person to set the tone for a successful management throughout. So every application needs to go through a lot of processes, and I'll let you take the lead with what processes we go through, Karen, just to name a few.
Yeah, so there's a lot obviously that goes into referencing a tenant and making sure that everything is put in place correctly. Like you say, making sure that these are legal documents that we're working with, so making sure that they are done correctly. We have the correct names, dates, addresses, everything that goes into this document, it has to be correct. And obviously there's a lot more that goes into it as opposed to just a tenancy agreement. Obviously we have our initial terms of business once a tenancy has been accepted. So again, making sure that everything is done detailed correctly in that. And obviously you have the whole process beforehand of actually the referencing process for the tenant. So there's a lot that goes into referencing a tenant, from detailed application forms, credit checks from employment ones to landlord references, even down to character references. Credit checks are done. Obviously we use an individual company to carry that out, so we can make sure that we are getting a correct and in-depth credit report for tenants. We've had ones before that I've said, no, I don't have any bad credit, and then you run this credit report and there it is. So making sure that you're running credit checks on tenants is such an important thing, to make sure that you're going to not come into any issues down the line. Obviously you never know, but trying to take these preventative steps in the first instance is such an important factor. You don't want to be moving somebody in that has a past history of rent arrears and has CCJs against them. Obviously it's not a good footing to start off a tenancy. Making sure a tenant is who they say they are as well, by carrying out ID checks, getting proof of their current address as well. Obviously it makes sure that you've got all your documents in a row for being able to put this tenancy agreement in place and going forward with moving. Obviously
Let's talk about employment. I think employment's quite an important one, obviously, and of income. So what's I mean, they need to be earning so much to obviously qualify to go through the referencing check, and if not, then what would we do then? What is the qualifying amount for tenants at the moment?
So there's a little sum for it. So you have to do the rent times 2.5 times 12, and that gives you their gross income that they have to earn to be able to qualify for the property.
2.5 times.
Yeah. So if a tenant doesn't have that affordability for it, then ultimately you could end up with problems down the line. We have had the odd tenant that maybe it doesn't quite reach that point, but they're just short of it. So in instances like that, where, do you know what, we think there would be a really good tenant, they've had a good landlord reference, all their previous referencing checks have passed, and obviously they're just short of it. So putting a guarantor in place can be a way to kind of give the landlord some extra security for it. And then you've got that peace of mind knowing, do you know what, hopefully everything will go smoothly, but if not, there's that little bit of backup there.
Yeah, guarantor is always a good alternative if the tenant can't quite qualify on their own. What's the qualifying status for a guarantor, employment and income wise?
So the guarantor has to have an income of 3 times the rent for the property.
Okay. And then obviously we get them to co-sign the tenancy agreement and things as well. And they are there as a safeguard. Obviously, if there's any default on the rental payments, or if there's any issues, we have the tenant has them as obviously their fallback, but we also have them as a point of contact to try and resolve any issues if there's issues with rental payments. And then I think obviously credit status check. So obviously, I mean, a sign of the times is obviously not everyone has a perfect credit score, and people do maybe have some financial issues in their past. So that's fine as long as people declare that, and they could demonstrate to us there's reasoning behind it, and that they are obviously working or have worked towards obviously resolving that. Do you get that quite a lot, Kim?
Yeah, we've had some in the past and even recently that have maybe had a little bit of bad credit on the report, and they've been honest and upfront about it. It's nothing excessive. At the end of the day, people do get themselves into situations sometimes. So providing that they can prove that they are working towards it, and they're financially stable enough now to be able to work towards that, as well as cover their rent and obviously bills for their new property, then obviously there's ways around it. Another one is we can take rent up front for it. So we've had one recently that she had a little bit of bad credit. It was nothing major. She'd explained it, been upfront about it, and she's paying 6 months rent up front to be like, look, this is obviously, I am in a suitable financial situation now. I can afford to do this. And it's just a wee bit of reassurance for us as well, that we can see that they're taking it seriously and they are obviously working to clear that off and keep on top of themselves financially now.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think that it is really important that they declare anything to us. I think it's always a red flag if we do the referencing checks and things pop up that haven't been discussed or even brought to our attention. Then it makes you question, well, why was it not brought to their attention? If like you say, people have become into some difficulty in the past and it's going to be on their check, then tell us about it, tell us why, explain to us. It's all about transparency and obviously being upfront, and I think that's the best way to start any relationship, I think, but obviously with a tenant, it's really important as well for the ongoing, obviously, tenancy and management and things as well. Proof of identity is quite an important one. Typically, what would we look for identity?
Usually, most common ones are a passport or a driver's license, so some sort of photographic ID.
Yeah. We've used birth certificates and things in the past. Some people don't always have passports or driver's license, but they are the most common things. And the tenancy agreement. The tenancy agreement is so important. Obviously, we worked for a lot of years with the short assured tenancy in Scotland, and there are tenancies that still have that in place from prior to 2017. But it's the private residential tenancy now in Scotland, and the private residential tenancy is a template set out by the Scottish Government. We've adapted ours slightly. We have certain things that we've implemented to obviously make it better work for us. But the importance of the tenancy agreement, Karen, to be signed and things on time is really important, yeah.
It is. Obviously, that needs to be signed and in place before a tenant's getting the keys for their property. Unless that's signed and they have their first month's rent in place, then that's when they can get the keys for it. But obviously, it's a big change that we went through from changing the different types of tenancies agreements. So obviously, landlords that are newly coming into this process, it's explaining to them obviously the differences, because quite a lot of them still think there's fixed terms to leases, when now on the new private residential tenancy there are no fixed terms anymore. It just goes on a rolling contract from month to month. So making landlords aware of that so they know what they're getting into in the first instance is obviously really important. And yeah, just keeping up to legislation so that we can feed that back to them.
Yeah, that's a very common assumption by people, that there's fixed terms now, and there isn't any fixed term in the tenancy. It's just a continual rolling contract, with the tenant being able to provide 28 days and 4 weeks at any point in time throughout a tenancy, which makes it even more important for us during the whole referencing qualifying process to establish the length that they want to stay in the property for. We can't hold anyone to a certain amount of time, but if we could build a picture and establish the time frame, the time scale that they want to stay in the property, then we could go back to the landlord and say, look, they're looking for a year, they're looking for 2 years, or they're looking for their forever home, and they're going to be here for the foreseeable. The last thing landlords want is tenants coming in every few months, and that whole turnaround process and the cost of doing that as well. That's quite an important factor. And like you say, payment of the first month's rent and having the standing order and thing for payment set up is important. Excuse me. Comprehensive inventories. Now, inventories as sometimes seen by landlords as not necessary. They aren't mandatory, but you and I both know, Karen, how important they really
So
are.
important.
Yeah, and obviously from your years in property management, dealing with Safe Deposit Scotland and deposit resolution, how important are inventories?
They are so important. As we say, they are not mandatory, but we highly advise having them done. Whether that's, we have landlords that have carried out their own ones. We have an independent contractor that does them, and it is such a comprehensive report. Quite a few landlords have an idea that if there's no furniture in the property, they don't need an inventory. But your inventory takes into account things such as the cleanliness, the condition of the paint, the floors, the oven, if you have one built in. It takes into account everything in the property. It's not just a case of if you have a couch or if there's furniture in the property. It's the whole condition of the property. So having this in place is such an important thing, because at the end of the tenancy, a landlord or agent has to prove. So for example, if a tenant went out and they'd left an iron mark on the carpet, thankfully I've only seen that once in my 5 years, but but if a tenant, for example, leaves an iron mark on the carpet, the landlord has to prove that it was not there at the start of the tenancy. So unless you have a comprehensive inventory done prior to that tenant moving in, then you're not able to prove that. Listing pictures do not count. You're not able to use them under like Safe Deposit Scotland's process. That they don't count, I'm afraid. So you have to have this inventory in place to make sure that you have a detailed report of what the property was like before the tenant got it. So you have your set expectations of what you should be getting it back like at the end of the tenancy, obviously taking into account fair wear and tear.
Yeah, that's another common assumption as well. If there's not an inventory in place, but something as blatantly obvious as an iron mark on the carpet, the assumption is that there should immediately be a claim rewarded for that. But the reality is we need to be able to prove that. We need to be able to prove that it wasn't there, and how are you going to do that without a record of it? And that's where the inventory comes into play. So yeah, and then obviously, like we said as well, obviously security deposits are all registered. We use Safe Deposit Scotland. There is 3 deposit schemes in Scotland, but Safe Deposit Scotland seems to be the most common one. We have always used them and had quite a successful relationship working with them over the years since they were put in place. But yeah, and inventories are very important. I'm just going to do a couple of good mornings. Good morning, Caroline. Hope you're well. There's a few questions there. We'll come back to them as we come to the end of things that we're discussing at the moment. But yeah, any amendments during a tenancy also need to be handled correctly. From a change of tenant in a shared household, so that is something that we come up against. Sometimes couples separate, sometimes single people become in a relationship, and we need to then amend obviously paperwork and reference that person before they could come into the tenancy and join on, and make sure that landlord's comfortable with that, and that again we've done our due diligence like we would with any tenancy at the beginning. But obviously sometimes it happens mid-tenancy. Do you deal with that a lot, Karen?
It doesn't happen too often, thankfully, because it's a lot of paperwork involved, but it does have the time, like you say, couples separate, somebody moves in, or if you've had a couple of friends that have been sharing the property and one of them moves out and needs to go into a sole tenancy. So it's making sure that if you have a new person coming into this tenancy agreement, that you're carrying out the necessary referencing that you would do at the start of a tenancy for anybody. Making sure that they are going to be a suitable tenant also for the property, and then obviously issuing a new tenancy agreement and getting both tenants to co-sign it to make sure that you have all the new paperwork in place for it.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely throughout the tenancy a lot could happen, and I think that'll bring us to inspections and maintenance and emergencies and things that obviously we deal with throughout the management of the property. So obviously, Karen, you spent quite a few years in property management. So as well as viewings and valuations, our diary has a lot more on it going on. Even rental properties need looking after because they only ever get older, which means regular checkups and continuous management are so important. So, I mean, the importance of inspections, Karen.
So important. Obviously, you need to be doing regular inspections to make sure that a tenant is looking after the property. Obviously, we have tenants that have been in our properties for years and are such good tenants. So as obviously establishing when a new tenancy starts, we would obviously advise every 3 months doing an inspection for it. It's not too invasive, but it gives you time to make sure that between checks that everything's still running smoothly. It also gives you a chance to build up a relationship with the tenant as well. It's not just somebody on the other end of the phone, it is a person that you can see face to face. And obviously sometimes there's things that tenants don't notice that we do because we know what we're looking for. So, and it's obviously the aim of it is to eliminate any issues before they become bigger issues.
Jim's saying in the comments there to send them the link to join in. I think if you can, Jim, I've actually sent you that through email. If you want to click on your emails, you'll get the link and you can join us for a little while. But yeah, obviously interim inspections are very important, and visiting a property at least every 6 months. I think initially we do quarterly inspections, which is every 3 months. But we tend to find if we do them every 3 months, maybe for the first year, and people are living in the property quite well, we're comfortable that the property's been looked after, the rental account's up to date, and the landlord feels comfortable, then we tend to then obviously wind that down and revert to maybe 6 months, 6 monthly inspections. I mean, it's not big invasive inspections, but we need to be present in the property at some point in time to have a look at the condition of the property and then relay that back to the landlord and give them some reassurance on the property's condition and things as well. And we just obviously say that's quite an important element of it, Karen.
Is at the end of the day, if a landlord has you managing the property, it's still good for them to know, look, your property is being looked after. Obviously, they're not the ones that are going and seeing it, we are. So doing that report for them, whether that's if there is a small issue, taking a wee picture of it so they can see that, it gives them a bit of reassurance that they know the property is being looked after.
Yeah. Good morning, Jim. How are you?
Oh.
Your volume's down. You need to sort your audio.
Technology is great when it works. We can't hear you.
It's difficult. It's difficult on the phone sometimes. It's in the bottom right-hand corner, Jim, or bottom left-hand corner. I think that yeah. Anyway, well, while Jim tries to sort that out, we also get a chance to catch up with the tenants doing inspections as well. I think that's really important to touch base with them and obviously keep building that relationship throughout obviously the tenancy. So yeah, touching base mid-tenancy at the inspection point is really important, Karen. And I think over the years I've built up great relationships with tenants, and I'm sure you've done the same with tenants throughout obviously the years.
These are people that you're seeing on a regular basis throughout the year. So it's you build up that relationship with them, and even their pets as well. We have one that has the most adorable pug that I love going to do their inspection because their dog is just the cutest. So it's building up that relationship with them. And obviously inspections aren't something to always worry about. It can be, do you know what, it'll be nice to go and see them.
I think he's given up. That's a shame, Jim. That would have been good for you to join and have a wee chat. If you could sort out that technical difficulty, that would be great if you could jump back in. But yeah, so and it's really good to have that relationship with tenants, and like you say, build a rapport, whether it's about their pets or just how they are in general. And I think it is so important because it makes them feel then comfortable to come to us with anything. I think one problem that is quite hard to deal with is if tenants are having difficulties maybe from a maintenance point of view, or they're struggling with rental payments for whatever reason financially. It pays dividends to come to your letting agent and say, look, this is my situation, and we will work with them to sort that out. I mean, a lot of tenants just want to maybe put the bit of their head in the sand and turn away from it, and that is not the answer and not how to deal with it, and we are here to help. And I think building those kind of relationships just gives them that reassurance that they can pick up the phone and speak to us, or ultimately walk into the office and speak to us. And I think one of the best elements of how we operate is obviously we do all our property management in-house. So whether it's from me dealing with the tenant at the initial stages, or yourself, Karen, obviously in the letting process, or if it's speaking to one of the girls in property management, whether it's a maintenance issue or if it's to do with the rent and things, you can actually go in and speak to that person face to face. And it's like, oh, it's like I'm having a wee bit of issue with my rent, I'll go in and I'll speak to Charlotte. Or do you know what I mean? I'm having a maintenance issue, I'll go in and speak to Emma. Or If it's the initial stages and they're trying to sort out the paperwork, they'll come in and speak to you or Angela. Do you know what I mean? So it's about having that close relationship with tenants and landlords, of course, obviously. It just pays dividends, I think, to have that in place. Speaking on maintenance and property management, as well as the general upkeep and repairs of a property, we need to keep an eagle eye on legal compliance. And there's around about 400 pieces of legislation and counting, as we're all too aware. There keeps to be new additions, obviously, of legislation, and it is so important to keep up to date. But in particular, obviously, valid safety certificates, in particular the gas and electric, energy performance certificates are such a big thing now. The energy performance rating. Obviously, we're going to have minimal EPC banding. Obviously, has been put in place, so every property in Scotland should be a band C or more or higher, should I say, by 2025. Now, that's only on newly let properties. So if you've got a tenant in place, you're fine. But obviously, when that property becomes vacant and relet, or it's a new property to the market, it needs to be advertised with an EPC rating of C. Now, generally, I mean, the national average on EPC ratings is a D, and generally, your typical ex-local authority and things is probably a D or a C, or quite easily able to be made a rating C. But obviously, there is properties out there that's going to be a wee bit more difficult. But that is a show in itself, I think, obviously, EPC ratings and how to tackle that. But the gas and electrical and EPC certificates are all so important, and they are, of course, the law, and we need to obviously abide by that. And so these all go in our calendar and on our property management dashboard. So on a daily basis, we are checking, obviously, the dates that are coming through. So anything that comes up for renewal for any property will be on our dashboard in the mornings of any working day. And we then obviously look to have them renewed or carried out so that they are kept valid. The importance of, in particular, a gas safety certificate, Karen.
Yes, they are, to me, they are the most important one. Obviously, they all need done, but a gas safety one is one that is due annually. Obviously, it's going in and making sure that the boiler is all safe and working, and you have a carbon monoxide detector in the vicinity of your boiler as well. Obviously, it's something that could easily go wrong, so having that check done yearly and making sure that the boiler is all safe is such an important factor. And at the end of the day, I need one to get a tenant moved in, so they have to be done. So important.
Yeah, they are so important. Obviously, gas safety is just is paramount. In addition to obviously the other certificates. So, I mean, the bottom line is, Karen, if we don't have the valid certificates, then a tenant can't be moved in, and that would just go against anything that we would ever carry out. So, I mean, that is just the most important thing at the beginning of a tenancy, to have that in place. And do you find you have issues with certificates at the beginning of a tenancy? I see you laugh.
I think you know the answer to that. It can be really difficult sometimes. I would say if it's a new property that's come on and the meters are in debt, or you have credit meters that are in debt that have either smart meters or have shown to be an absolute nightmare trying to get them topped up when you don't have cards.
Yeah.
Obviously, the meters in the past have had keys and cards that we've been able to either get replaced or are there to be able to top up, which has made it a wee bit easier. But this new smart meter version has just been a nightmare. So we've had a bit of a battle this week to get one of our gas meters sorted, but it has been done. The gas safety certificate has been done, and the tenant is all set to move in on Monday. So it can be a bit tricky, but getting there in the end is really satisfying. And again, that all came down to teamwork with it. Obviously relying on our property management department, Charlotte and Emma have worked really hard to get that sorted for me this week. So it's great that it's been done and we can get a tenant moved in. Same with the electrical side of it as well. Obviously making sure electric meters are in credit so we can get the EICRs carried out. Obviously having smoke alarms in place, making sure your RCD board is compliant, and obviously the other factors that come into that as well is really important.
Yeah, and that, like you say, obviously comes down to our teamwork and how beneficial it is to the whole process. Speaking about property, obviously compliance and certificates and things, I've got a comment here which will come back to. It just says Facebook user. The Facebook user, there is a link at the top. If you click it, the StreamYard link, it will make you visible so I could address you in person. But your question is, what can you as a letting agent do when you have a landlord that won't or can't spend money on their property, even if it means the property falls below tolerable standard? Well, the answer to that question is, obviously, in the first instance, we would never let a property unless it is obviously at a certain standard, and obviously it is compliant in the beginning. And then it's our job to maintain that throughout. Now, obviously, if we are dealing with a landlord who is not abiding by that or doesn't wish to abide by that, then ultimately then we won't work with them. It's not something that we would like to do, and it goes against what obviously the law dictates, and also what we would who we would want to work with. And that's another thing that we spoke about through the week, Karen, was working with people obviously that are in the right mindset and trust us to take the lead and obviously look after the property rather than being too involved or not involved enough. Do you come up against that a lot, Karen?
Unfortunately, we do. We have a lot of really good landlords that do really care about their properties and want to make that a good home for their tenants. When things go wrong, they are proactive alongside us to get issues rectified. But there are the odd landlord, unfortunately, that don't either have the money to spend or don't want to spend the money. So trying to come to a resolution with that is to trying to get it rectified with a maintenance issue, for example, or when a property comes available again, and we don't have that interest in it because it's not to a standard that somebody wants to let it. It's obviously having that conversation with the landlord, being transparent with them and saying, look, this is what's needed to be done. If you don't want to do it, we're not going to be able to find you a new tenant for it because it's not in the condition that somebody wants to stay in it. And at the end of the day, we want to provide a good home for somebody that they're going to be happy to stay in. So sometimes it is having that honest conversation with a landlord that they are going to have to put their hand in their pocket and fix their property.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, sometimes it's hard to sugarcoat things, and we do need to be quite direct in order to get things done. And that's, I think, if it was me as an investor or a landlord, and it was my agent, I would just want them to tell me the way it is and how it's meant to be done. Throughout a tenancy, and there's a tenant in place, obviously we have a duty of care for tenants, as well as obviously a contract with our landlords and investors as clients. So if we come to the point where there is a gas safety certificate for renewal, generally we just arrange it anyway. I mean, we obviously make sure that the landlord's aware of that in case obviously they want to use their own contractors and things, but that's fine. But if there is an issue where it's become the time where it needs renewed and there isn't anything getting done about it, ultimately, to answer your question, Facebook user, is we would just do it anyway and deduct it for the rent. Because at the end of the day, it's law, and it needs to be done in terms of, obviously, I think gas safety is the most important, I think, and now obviously smoke alarms and things as well are all imperative that they are in place and valid. Caroline also put a question in here. What's your current average timescale for an advert going live, a tenant moving in date, assuming the tenant and the property are all good to go? Well, how long is a piece of string, Karen? But very short lately. I mean, we're turning things around. I mean, typically, I mean, as a rule of thumb, I would say maybe around about 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, it could be a lot shorter than that, or a lot longer. In the current market and how busy things have been, Karen, I mean, what kind of timescale are you looking at for moving people, turning things around and moving people in?
It can go anything from up to a week to maybe 4. At the end of the day, we go through, when the property goes on the market, those inquiries are coming in straight away. So as soon as we can find a suitable tenant for it, their deposit holds it for up to a month for them. So that gives us a chance for them, if they've got notice to give on their property, it works quite well. It gives them a chance to have a wee overlap to get everything moved and finished up with what they need to in their current one. But yeah, you're probably looking at about anywhere between 1 to 6 weeks, but I would say the average is kind of around about 3 or 4 weeks just now between a property going on the market to a tenant moving into it.
Yeah, that's typically what I thought, but I mean, we are turning things around in shorter time as a week. But then that's all dependent on the property being ready, compliant, good to go, and the tenants being prepared with all their relevant information and documentation, and that just streamlines the whole process. If the tenant's prepared, the landlord's prepared, the property's ready, and we are satisfied that everything's in place to be able to proceed, and then actually then start to draw up tenancy agreements and things. That is a really important factor. But yes, obviously things have become, even more fast-paced in recent months and in the last year, especially. But yeah, back to maintenance and properties and emergencies. And obviously, emergencies at properties is an important factor as well, and things that need to be managed correctly. Fortunately, emergencies are few and far between when properties are managed correctly, and I think that's important. A lot of things that become emergencies can be avoided if they're picked up in time, and that's a combination of us doing inspections and keeping in contact with the tenant, and likewise the tenant keeping in contact with us. And something that may be quite minor to start with can then be an emergency. Something as simple as maybe a seal not on a bath properly over time could end up, there could be water continually running down there, the tenant isn't aware, and the next thing, the ceiling below obviously caves in. I mean, for example, worst case scenario obviously, but these things do happen. But whenever the unexpected does happen, it's rarely at a convenient moment, and we always tend to find that, Karen, that the phone will ring and it will be Friday night or it will be Saturday night, and typically that's when these kind of things tend to happen. But that's what we are here for, obviously, in the property management side of things. And I think that's why landlords and investors entrust management companies to do that for them, because the last thing that you want when you are sitting on a Saturday night is your tenant to phone you with a situation where you have to get up off the sofa or come away from your plans and deal with it, when you could have a managing agent like ourselves do that for you. And I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of situations like that over the years, Karen.
I have. We've had a whole variation of it, from tenants locking themselves out, they've lost their key, have to go down to the office and give them their key so they can get back in, to boilers breaking down in winter time. So again, it's making sure that you have a local agent that's on hand to deal with these issues, and they have reliable contractors that again are on hand to be able to attend the properties. We've had ones that have had to go out at ridiculous times, but they are there and they're there to help us, and we have such a good relationship with them, and we do really appreciate them doing this work for us.
I think we've got a lot of certain contractors that go above and beyond for us, and we do really appreciate that, because it allows us to do our job more efficiently. And a lot of landlords and people that maybe self-manage don't have that kind of contact as well. But again, we've spent a lot of years building up those relationships with contractors to be able to pick up the phone and get them to go out at ridiculous times, even Christmas Day in the past. But obviously that's not that common. But I mean, there is an extremely fine line between a genuine emergency and maybe just an urgent repair. And that's obviously something that you really need to work out before just sending a contractor over the weekend or whatever, or through holidays and things. And we need to balance that with keeping tenants assured that we're on the case and keeping them in the loop, and the landlords as well, that are confident that we're managing their investment properly. And it's not always easy, and it's all about mediation, I think, with that, especially with repairs. You need to keep the tenant in the loop and satisfied that work's being done in the necessary time scale, and make sure the landlord's reassured that we're dealing with it and it's getting dealt with a reliable contractor and getting done at a reasonable rate, obviously cost-wise and things. So there is a lot involved in that, and I think that kind of sums up today's topic about, obviously, a day in the life of a letting agent or a managing agent, is that there is so much more that goes on behind the scenes, and it isn't just come into the office and make your coffee and check your emails and things. There's so much more to it, Karen, and I'm sure you'll agree with that.
Yeah, I think we did a list one day following one of our training courses just to see what we did, and I think just in the lettings process there was over 100 points of what we do, basically. So, and that's the thing, when you break it down, there's a lot that goes into it. So making sure that you've got an agent that knows what they're doing or even a landlord, making sure that you're clued up in what you're doing in the process for it is such an important factor.
Yeah, it's so important, and I think that is something that is so important as well, that we obviously go through that whole process on behalf of the landlord, so they don't have to do it. And I think that is such an important thing. But yeah, so I mean, final thoughts for this morning, Karen?
There's a lot that goes into being an estate agent, so knowledge is power.
Yeah, definitely, knowledge is power, and I think, like you say, the list that we done, obviously we do continual training, and that was part of our training, just to see, and we even surprised ourselves that even like you say, and that's only the letting process. That's not the management side. We just done it from obviously the letting process at the beginning, and we were, yeah, like you say, it was at least 100 points we got to of all the different stages, and that's just advertising the property and getting to the point of moving a tenant in. And then obviously the ongoing management for there is such a complex process, which we've kind of honed over the years into a daily thing, which is fine for us. So I think for me, if you are an investor and looking to build your portfolio and have a successful buy-to-let portfolio, it is important to have a reliable managing agent who has reliable contractors, who is very knowledgeable, in place looking after your portfolio. Whether you're in Fife or whether you're anywhere in the country, I suppose, make sure you have a good letting agent and management agent looking after your investment, because it will pay dividends in the long run. And I think that's where I would finish that today, because that is, I think for me, where the topic lies this morning. So thank you very much for joining me this morning, Karen. That was good. I think you were the best person to bring in and talk about that, because it is what you do on a daily basis. So thank you for that, and thanks everyone for joining and commenting. Unfortunately, Jim couldn't get through properly, but I'm sure we'll catch up with him. He will be doing his roundup tomorrow of the sales market, and he will also be doing his wealth creation show with James on Monday evening at 6:30 p.m. So if you are an investor in building your portfolio, please join in and listen to that, because it is a lot of good advice and tips for investment. So on that note, I'm going to end here this morning. Karen, thank you so much for joining, and thanks to everyone else.